into like the last week of the presidential election, only about 4% of voters were undecided. But in this election, 12.5% found to be undecided. So that effect of undecided voters on the way that the polls are actually worded could have a larger effect, and that could skew the numbers quite a bit. Also, surveys take time. So in the last week and a half before the election, there was another thing with the FBI looking into Hillary Clinton's emails again, and she actually did say that that stopped her momentum. That's debatable because when you look at the numbers, there were some polls that they did manage to do within that time frame of when that news came out, and between that and the election, and it didn't really show any change. By that point, a lot of people had already made up their minds, except for these 12.5, but it didn't really sway the numbers that too much. So that seems kind of negligible. But I also wanted to see how accurate polls were historically, and for the most part, polls are pretty accurate as far as the popular vote. So in this election, Clinton was predicted to get 48.5% of the vote, and Trump was predicted to get 44.9%. And with any of these polls, there's a 3 percentage point margin of error. So these numbers can go up or down by 3 points. So even with these numbers, you can see that there's still a chance that Trump could win, and obviously he did. But even the numbers are actually really close to the predictions. So the popular vote overall for the nation was actually really close and not that far off. And it's actually closer than the previous 3 elections. They were off by more percentage points. So what went wrong? And it all comes down to the swing states and the electoral college, obviously, because Clinton did win the popular vote. So the polls were actually right overall, but it was in these starred states right here are the states that in the 2012 election went to the Democratic side, but in this election went to the Republican side. And I found when I dug through the numbers myself that these 6 states were on average vastly wrong. Like they all predicted that Clinton would win by a huge margin, and she didn't. So what this is the advantage difference. Is what that means. So if Clinton is predicted to win by 3 percentage points, and she actually wins by 2, then the advantage difference is 1. They're 1 percentage point wrong. The national average for the polls being off was 2.5 percentage points, but in these 6 flipped states, the average number of points they were off was nearly 5. So you can see that there was something really wrong with these specific states. And these states here, that gave him 100. That's the in the 2012 election, Obama won by like 332 electoral college votes, I believe, and Clinton got 100 less, and that's all these states right here. And so all sorts of websites have all sorts of ideas of why this happened, why the predictions were so far off for these states in particular. And it all comes down to, everyone seems to agree that it comes down to being unable to predict the people that supported Trump in particular. And the Pew research actually kind of summarized it really well. They kind of took everything into account, and there's going to be an ongoing investigation. But these were the top 3 theories as to why the predictions were so far off. Top was the non-response bias, which what that is there's people that when they get called for an opinion poll, they just won't respond. And if those people happen to fall in one camp more than another, then your opinion polls are going to be skewed. And historically, people without a college degree are found to be tough to poll. They just won't respond to opinion polls. And in this election, the gap between the people without a degree voting one way, which favored Trump, and those with a degree voting the other way, which favored Clinton, there was the highest gap between those 2 camps since the 1980 election. So that's obviously going to skew your poll numbers. There's something that's come up called shy Trumpers, which I didn't really see any support for that. But it's the idea that people supporting Trump feel that it's not socially acceptable, so they lie in the polls. But they did online polls, and it didn't show any difference between that if I really want to vote, then I'm going to tell someone about it and I'm going to go do it. But enthusiasm for this election in particular was really low, and it's actually way lower than any election in recent history. But the thing with that is that Trump supporters were always pulled to be more enthusiastic than Clinton supporters. So if you called up 20 people, 10 said I'm going to vote for Trump, 10 said I'm going to vote for Clinton, then the people that voted for Trump are actually more likely to go out and vote as opposed to the Clinton ones, so that's going to skew your numbers as well. So my conclusion that I came to with all of this is that the polls in themselves aren't bad. On average, they actually, on the national scale, they actually work really well. The only thing is